Eleanor and I met at an architectural exhibition, and she was as bright and full of life as the sun. I remember the day she stood in front of my design in a yellow dress, smiled at me, and said, "This building of yours looks like a poem. It's mesmerizing." Our love began as beautifully as ever. I took her on tours of the buildings I designed. She accompanied me on walks through the streets of Los Angeles. We went to classical concerts together, and we poured our hearts out to each other countless times under the starlight. Her inquisitive blue eyes always made me forget all my troubles. I thought our love would always be this sweet. After our wedding, we moved into our new home in Beverly Hills. It was a house I designed myself, with a spacious patio and large floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean in the distance. I thought that this dream home would be the harbor of our happy life. The first few years of our marriage were indeed full of happiness, and Eleanor's photography career took off, with her photographs being exhibited in small galleries. I, on the other hand, had some success in my architectural career. Our marriage seemed perfect. But time has brought changes, and Eleanor is no longer as enthusiastic about family life as she once was. She became more and more interested in leaving the house, traveling, and going on adventures. I, on the other hand, with my busy work schedule, preferred to enjoy the peace and quiet at home. "Ethan, you're always so busy. It's been a long time since we've been on a trip together." Eleanor's voice held a hint of disappointment. "I'd love to spend time with you, but I've had an important project at work lately and I can't get away." I tried to explain, but more loss flooded her eyes. I began to feel as if there was an additional invisible wall between us, one that blocked the communication that was once deep in our hearts. I didn't know what challenges she was facing in her photography work, and she no longer cared about the pressures I was facing in my architectural work. Our lives began to fall apart. Eleanor grew silent. Sometimes I noticed that she would gaze at the ocean late at night with a longing and pain in her eyes that I couldn't decipher. "Eleanor, are you okay?" I tried to be concerned, but she always smiled and replied, "It's okay. I'm just a little tired." In fact, I could feel the uneasiness and dissatisfaction building up in her heart. Finally, one day, she couldn't help but explode to me, "Ethan, I can't stand this life anymore. I can't stand this life. All I face every day is the house, my work, and your cold face." I looked at her in shock, not knowing how to respond. There was determination in her eyes, and at that moment, I felt the love between us fading. "Eleanor, we can work together to change." I tried to redeem myself, but she just held her arms and was silent. Cracks began to appear in our marriage. I often sit alone in my spacious living room, remembering how sweet we were when we first met and lamenting why we have come to this point. We were once deeply in love with each other but drifted apart because of the different paces of our lives. It was at this time that Gabriel appeared in Eleanor's life. He was a vibrant and talented young actor with the kind of charming smile that makes any woman's heart flutter. I could tell that Eleanor was curious about him. She began to meet him frequently and go out under various names. Though she tried to hide it, I gradually sensed a change deep within her. It was a passion and joy never seen in her before. Eleanor was getting busier and busier. Every day was filled with her various shooting assignments and social events. I was always alone at home, facing the cold air and empty rooms. I began to feel that we were drifting apart, but I still chose to trust her. One day, in the early morning sun, I found her cell phone left on the dining room table. It was a cell phone that was blinking with a new message alert, and out of curiosity, I picked it up not out of suspicion, but because of an inexplicable urge. The moment I opened the message, my heart sank. On the screen was a message from Gabriel. "Last night's dinner and being with you was the best time I've ever had. Looking forward to seeing you next time." My hands were shaking as I pressed on, sliding the screen of my phone to continue scrolling through. In the flurry of conversations, I saw the details of their interactions, the easygoing, ambiguous words that pierced my heart. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. But an unspeakable anger and disappointment filled my entire body and mind. Eleanor, the woman I had loved so much, had begun to have a different heart for another man. I didn't immediately expose her, but chose to remain calm. Maybe it was out of pride, or maybe it was a struggle that was still going on inside of me. I began to watch her every move, observing her every reason for going out, every time she returned. I was hoping to find more evidence, hoping that it was all just a misunderstanding. However, it was not to be. Everything seemed to confirm my suspicions. Everything seemed to confirm my suspicions that Eleanor and Gabriel were getting closer and closer, and that Gabriel was the most frequent subject of her photographs. They visited secret places, places she hadn't told me about. The long-lost light in her eyes is evident each time she returns. One night, under the pretext of being late for work, I quietly followed her car to some hidden cafe in Los Angeles. And there, I saw her and Gabriel in intimate conversation. Their smiles were so real, with a sweetness and pleasure that I hadn't been able to see on her face for a long time. "Ethan, I have a shoot tonight, and I might be home late," she said to me the other night. I continued to nod my head as usual, my insides rippling. Late that night, she came back quietly and lay beside me after her shower. I could smell the perfume on her. It wasn't her usual brand, but an unfamiliar scent. I quietly leaned in close and whispered softly in her ear, "Did the shoot go well today?" She just nodded gently, then turned her back to me. Sleeping next to her, I was in agony. Eleanor's betrayal was like a knife in my heart, and I couldn't sleep. She didn't know that I knew everything, and still pretended to be normal in front of me. I didn't know how to cope with the sudden change. Despite the doubts and pain inside, I still chose to hold back. I didn't know how to face this issue, and I was afraid of losing this woman who once belonged to me. Perhaps at that time, I still held a glimmer of hope that she would come to her senses and return to me. Eleanor also seemed to realize the change in my mood, and she began to show me more care and consideration. She would ask me about work after dinner and would walk with me to the beach on the weekends, gestures that left me feeling conflicted and confused. Perhaps it was just her way of compensating, a sign of guilt. I tried to escape this pain at work, however. The hurt grew stronger every late night. I began to often recall the happy times we had, and those wonderful moments kept flashing in my mind like movie images. My heart was full of contradictions and confusion, unable to make up my mind. Eleanor's secret has become a thorn in my side, causing me to lose my mind in agony. She, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to all this, still pursuing her passion and freedom. The time we once loved each other was like a dream, fading away. During this secretive and withdrawn time, I felt more inner struggle and hurt than I had ever felt before, and Eleanor's long-forgotten smile pierced my heart. And I began to realize that our marriage had gone into an abyss. The gears of fate are turning, and I will face more challenges and pain in the near future. It was a normal weekday, and I was busy designing a new building. The phone suddenly rang. It was Eleanor. "Ethan, I have to stay late tonight. There are some photos that need to be edited." Her voice was calm, still as usual. I responded out of habit, "Okay, be safe." After a long, sedentary day at the office, I decided to take a break at the bar, where Charles, my coworker and best friend, is often the one I confide in. "How's it going?" Charles asked, pouring me a glass of whiskey. "Everything is fine, just—" I wanted to say something and tilted my head back to take a big gulp of wine. Charles watched me and seemed to see what was going on in my mind, but he didn't ask any more questions. He just drank quietly with me. It was late at night when I got home. The soft light from the lamp covers the study, and I overhear the camera Eleanor left on the table. She had forgotten to take it with her in her haste to leave. Curious, I looked through the pictures in the camera, and the beautiful landscapes and art photos gradually became blurred, finally settling on one heartbreaking image. An intimate photo of Eleanor and Gabriel. My hands were shaking, and anger and sadness kept turning up in my heart. That image hit me again and again. It was as if my world had collapsed in an instant, and all my trust, love, and hope for the future had gone up in smoke. "Eleanor, why?" I asked myself silently, repeating it countless times, but I couldn't find an answer. I sat on the couch, replaying all the details in my mind: her smile, her silence, her unspoken excuses. It was early in the morning when Eleanor got home. "Why are you still up?" she asked in surprise. I didn't answer, just remained silent. She went into the study, saw the camera, and her face turned pale. She realized that I already knew the truth. "Ethan, I can explain. Her voice trembled a little, but I didn't give her a chance. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking down at the lights of the city as if everything in the city was laughing at my stupidity. From that day on, I understood that my marriage was completely broken. The pain was gradually replaced by hatred. I couldn't forgive Eleanor for her betrayal, and I couldn't accept that Gabriel had taken my place. The man in me, who had once loved her, began to gradually transform. I thought over and over in the dead of night about how to get revenge and how to make them pay for their actions. A plan gradually formed in my mind, a sophisticated and cruel plan for revenge. At another meeting with Charles, I finally worked up the courage to tell him what had happened to me. He looked surprised, but quickly calmed down and tried to comfort me. Ethan, it's not the end of the world. You need to calm down and don't let the hate consume you. But calmness seemed to have become very distant for me. I could never forget that picture and the guilty, helpless look in Eleanor's eyes. I decided not to wait any longer, but to start acting. As an architect, I know the rules of how the Los Angeles real estate market works. Using my contacts and resources, I began to quietly put a stop to Eleanor's photography studio. Through several business partners in the real estate market, I managed to get the studio she was leasing to raise the rent dramatically and create a series of inexplicable complaints and problems. At the same time, I began to focus on Gabriel's movie career. Using some of my connections in Hollywood circles, I spread rumors against him, trying to destroy his image in the eyes of directors and producers. My tactics were subtle but powerful, gradually eroding their careers and lives. My secretary, Olivia, has always been my right hand at work. She was keenly aware of my mood changes and some unusual behavior. One day, she suddenly asked me, "Ethan, you look tired lately. Are you okay?" "It's okay. I've been a little stressed at work lately." I tried to gloss over it, but she obviously didn't believe me. She clearly didn't believe me, and Olivia's eyes showed concern, but she didn't press the issue. Over the next few days, however, Olivia seemed to begin quietly investigating my movements. Being the smart woman that she is, she quickly picked up on some of the signs and ventured to ask me tentatively, "Ethan, you've overheard the name Gabriel mentioned? Did something happen between them?" I looked at her calmly and, without hiding anything, confessed my plan. She listened with a complicated look in her eyes. She was silent for a while and eventually chose to support me, but reminded me not to be blinded by hatred. However, in the dead of night, I still often fall into deep contemplation. Do I really want to take such merciless revenge on Eleanor and Gabriel? And will revenge truly heal my wounds, or will it plunge me into endless darkness? In the midst of this inner struggle, I began to realize how I had changed. I became more and more cold and unscrupulous, and my inner hatred gradually consumed the warmth and love of the past. I even began to enjoy the thrill of this revenge. My plan for revenge unfolded gradually as I used my resources and connections in the Los Angeles real estate market to begin to drive Eleanor's photography studio into the ground. High rents, unexpected complaints, and all sorts of trouble made her job increasingly difficult. "Eleanor, what's been going on in your studio lately, and why are you having so many problems?" Her best friend Victoria asked her suspiciously. "I don't know. Everything seems to be getting worse." Eleanor replied helplessly, exhaustion and despair shining in her eyes. At the same time, Gabriel's career began to experience unprecedented difficulties. Through my carefully laid traps, Gabriel's major film projects were shelved, investors suddenly withdrew their funding, and directors became suspicious of him. He went from being an up-and-coming talent to being isolated. I made Gabriel a target by constantly creating fake news and spreading rumors. I heard Gabriel's been in trouble lately. He seems to have fallen out with some investor. Gossip in the movie business was spreading fast, leaving Gabriel in the lurch. Whenever I saw them in trouble, I actually felt a twinge of pleasure inside me. However, this pleasure could not fill the gradually expanding emptiness within me. I was always torn deep inside, struggling in pain. Eleanor felt the burden of life getting heavier and heavier. One day, she came home and collapsed on the sofa, tears welling up in her eyes. I stood by and watched her coldly, without the slightest sympathy. "Ethan, I don't know what to do. I've lost everything. Why is this happening to me? She asked, sobbing. I didn't answer, just hung my head gently and turned my back. Maybe this is fate. I thought coldly in my mind. Olivia helps me gather intelligence, and she's always done her part. However, she gradually realized that my plans for revenge were beyond her imagination and began to worry about me. Ethan, I know you're hurt, but at this rate, you're going to destroy yourself. Olivia opened her mouth to me late one night. Olivia, I'm at my wit's end. I responded calmly, a cold gleam in my eyes. However, Olivia begins to secretly try to find a solution. She made quiet contact with Eleanor, persuaded her to tell Gabriel the truth, and asked for help. She even risked my discovery by leaking some vital information to Eleanor. I decided to bring my revenge plan to a climax. Through several elaborate schemes, I destroyed Gabriel's last hope in Hollywood. At an important awards ceremony, I exposed his feud with a certain director through my connections, causing him to lose face in front of the crowd. That night, Eleanor and Gabriel were hit like never before, and their love began to crumble under the pressure. Their love begins to crumble under the pressure, and they feel helpless and desperate. Gabriel's once confident and radiant personality disappears in that moment, and he is left in a state of disarray. And I, standing on the sidelines of the awards ceremony, watched it all. It was my victory, but there was no joy in my heart. The thrill of revenge was short-lived, and the emptiness that followed was even heavier. Step by step, the plan of vengeance advances, and I realize that my heart has gradually become cold and heartless. The woman I once loved is now just an object to be devoured by my hatred, and I myself have lost myself in this revenge. One night I sat in my spacious study, gazing out the window at the stars. Those sweet memories from the past came flooding back like a tidal wave, causing me more and more pain. My mind was filled with doubts and confusion. Was it all really worth it? Ethan, you shouldn't be doing this. A voice seemed to ring in my ears, and I turned my head in surprise, realizing that it was just my own hallucination. I sighed and closed my eyes, not knowing how to move on. All this conflict erupted one stormy night, and Eleanor, unable to bear the gradual destruction of her life and career any longer, rushed home, stumbled through the heavy rain and into our living room. Ethan, what the hell have you done to us? Her voice was filled with anger and despair. Her face was gaunt, and her tears mixed with the rain made her look miserable. I stood silently before her, the pain and conflict within me pounding at my will. Eleanor, there was sadness and anger in those blue eyes, eyes that I had once loved, and that at the moment were so foreign to me. I just want you to pay your fair share, my voice said coldly, as if explaining something that couldn't be simpler. The price? For what price? You destroy everything. Ethan, what does such vengeance get you? Her voice trembled, and a deep sense of helplessness and pain came into her eyes. I didn't answer, just looked at her silently. Hatred had turned my heart cold, but somewhere deep down her questioning triggered me to reflect. For a moment, I felt a wave of indescribable exhaustion, as if all my strength had been drained from me. The vengeance doesn't stop there, as Eleanor and Gabriel gradually fall deeper and deeper into trouble. Gabriel's career is almost completely destroyed, his reputation in Hollywood is in tatters, and all of his projects fall through because of my manipulations. Eleanor, I don't know when this nightmare will end. Gabriel sat disheveled on the couch with a look of confusion and pain in his eyes. I don't know, Gabriel, but we can't let Ethan destroy us, Eleanor said firmly, a flicker of agonized determination flashing across her face. They realized that they were caught in an elaborate trap, but were powerless to break free. Helplessness and despair came in like a tidal wave, devouring their faith and hope. Meanwhile, Olivia begins to realize that Ethan's plan for revenge is out of her control. After many days of watching in secret, she finally decides to take action. One night, she made a quiet appointment with Eleanor and told her concerns and the truth as she knew it. Eleanor, Ethan has gone too far. You have to find a way to stop him, Olivia said, with tension and determination in her eyes. Thank you, Olivia. But what else can we do? He's already in control. There was skepticism in Eleanor's voice. "We can join forces. You must face him and uncover all the truth." Olivia continued, her words full of intensity. With Olivia's help, Eleanor and Gabriel begin to gather evidence and prepare to publicly expose Ethan's behavior. They try to sabotage Ethan's plan through legal means, but it takes time and strategy. In the course of my revenge, I found myself becoming more and more callous, even detached from my original intentions. I began to feel a deep sense of self-loathing, while also coming to realize that revenge did not give me any real satisfaction. One night, Charles invited me out for a drink to try to get me to relax. "Ethan, is this really worth it?" he asked heavily. "I don't know, Charles, that I really don't know." I sighed helplessly, the conflict and pain inside me becoming more and more unbearable. Just as my heart was wavering, Olivia's help led Eleanor and Gabriel to finally find an opportunity to reveal the truth about me at a public event. It was an important charity dinner, attended by a who's who of LA. Eleanor and Gabriel had prepared an elaborate document containing all the details of my revenge plan and operation. Later that night, Eleanor stood on stage, her voice firm as she revealed what I had done. "Today, I'm going to reveal an untold truth about what Gabriel and I have endured." Her voice echoed through the hall as everyone listened intently. Hearing her speak, I felt a surge of shock and fear, and my inner defenses completely collapsed. Her every word was like a sharp blade, piercing my soul. My eyes met hers, and those once loving eyes were now full of accusation. Gabriel also stood on stage and emphasized the devastating blow I had dealt to his career and the lengths I had gone to with Eleanor. The hall was silent as everyone watched the scene. In the days following the charity dinner, my heart became extremely heavy. On the one hand, Eleanor and Gabriel's revelation had brought my revenge plan to light, and on the other hand, the hatred and emptiness in my heart grew deeper and deeper. I couldn't find peace in my heart, and the desire for revenge came over me once again, and I decided to do whatever it took to get it. I began to use more subtle and extreme methods. Through some underground contacts, I found several journalists who specialized in creating scandals and secretly arranged for them to follow and film Gabriel's private trips and fabricate a series of negative stories about him. When these scandals came to light, Gabriel's reputation suffered an irreparable blow. His image fell so far in the public eye that he couldn't even face his own face in the mirror. "Eleanor, I have nothing now," he said to her dejectedly, despair in his eyes. Olivia couldn't watch me go off the deep end. After her many attempts at persuasion failed, she decided to take stronger measures. She approached Charles and tried to unite with him to stop me. "Ethan, he is completely lost, Charles. We have to help him," she pleaded. Charles was both pained and helpless inside seeing my former friend in his current state. "Olivia, I'll do what I can, but we need to find a way to make him realize his mistake." They decided to act together and try to help me through legal and counseling. Charles had a long talk with me again at a late-night bar party. He asked me, "Ethan, what are you really doing this for? Does this kind of revenge really fulfill you?" The alcohol made me emotional, and I responded to him angrily, "Charles, you have no idea. They betrayed everything we had, and I can't just let it go." Charles was silent for a moment, sighed, and said, "Ethan, you're destroying yourself as you seek revenge. Is that really the result you want?" His words hit me like a stone. I sat there quietly, lost in endless thought. All the pain and anger, all the effort and revenge, surprisingly made me feel more and more lonely and empty. Eleanor and Gabriel's lives were becoming more and more difficult as a result of my blows. But they didn't give up hope. With the help of Olivia and Victoria, they decided to make a fresh start. "Eleanor, we need to be brave about everything and not let Ethan destroy our lives." Victoria encouraged her. "Yes, we will not yield." Eleanor responded firmly. She and Gabriel decided to leave Los Angeles and start over in a new city. They sold all their possessions and raised a fortune to open a new photography studio. On the last night before parting, Eleanor grabbed her camera and captured a nighttime view of Los Angeles, a city that has witnessed their love-hate relationship as well as their growth and profound pain. Just as they were about to leave, Olivia approached me again. She told me about Eleanor and Gabriel's upcoming plans to leave. Ethan, if you have any shred of humanity left, please spare them, she said pleadingly, her eyes containing tears. I didn't respond. I just looked into her expectant eyes and felt the conflict deep inside me grow more violent. Though there was still hatred in my heart that I couldn't erase, I began to question whether what I was doing was worth it. Just as I was shaking inside, I suddenly received an unknown caller. It was Gabriel, and his voice was full of exhaustion and hopelessness. Ethan, we need to talk. This has all gone too far. We met at an out-of-the-way cafe. It was our last confrontation without any cover or pretense. Ethan, I'm not trying to hurt you. My feelings for Eleanor and I were wrong, but that was our own problem. Gabriel looked me straight in the eye, his tone firm. But is it really going to make you happy if you destroy us like this? I looked into his sincere eyes and my inner defenses completely collapsed. All the hatred, anger, and pain burst out in this moment, and I closed my eyes in agony, feeling myself plunged into an endless abyss. In this abyss, Eleanor and Gabriel chose to make a new start, while I fell into a self-absorption from which I could not extricate myself. Life was as cruel as a dream, and I lost myself in hatred. Eleanor and Gabriel's love is tested through thick and thin, and they ultimately choose to persevere and rebuild. I, on the other hand, through all of this agony, finally realized that revenge doesn't bring any real satisfaction. It only makes you more miserable. I fell into endless emptiness and self-reflection. Was revenge worth it? And where does the entanglement between love and hate go from here? All this, perhaps, can only be left to the future to find the answer. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.